So a warm good evening after, well, another quite remarkable day of cricket. For all of the Nepal fans in particular, an evening they will probably never forget, as they have turned what was a first ever win over a full member nation 2 days ago in that first Unity Cup game into what is now a historic first ever series victory over a full member nation, joining a very elite list that I will tell you about a little later. I've got a new venue to record this evening. We are into the early hours of the morning. We're outdoors up on the rooftop of the hotel, the team hotel here. So apologies for some of the probably slightly poor music in the background. Hopefully you won't be hearing too much of that. I just thought I'd give you some of my immediate thoughts after another extraordinary day, one that I'm still trying to digest and take in. We do have the cup of tea alongside us again, a little bit of peppermint again we've gone with, so I'll be supping along on that, and I've got a few little talking points that I wanted to go through, starting with the emotions of this evening and I guess what that will mean to the nation, to the players and to the people both back in Nepal and that diaspora all around the world. I've spoken a few times over the last couple of years about the importance of sport and that kind of sense of self-belief and that act of realization and kind of self-actualization and what it can do for a country, and particularly given the incredibly tragic events of earlier in the month through the Gen Z protests, which Rohit Paudel spoke much more eloquently than I could about. I think certainly this is a week that the country is never going to forget, and who knows, tomorrow there could well be a series, a clean sweep to celebrate to go with it. I've received messages from all over the world, and one of the key words that so many people have said to me is that of solace, and the solace that they have taken and the joy that they have taken. They're the overriding emotions, but also there should be pride in the brilliance of Nepal's performance and the quality that they have put in on the field in thoroughly outplaying the West Indies and deserving every bit of their 2-0 series lead and all the records that went with it. I suppose also wanted to touch on the role models that those young men are. Predominantly the entire Nepal squad, pretty much made up of very young players. Only Karen KC and Sampal Kami are the wrong side of 30 or older than 30, and you won't meet too many better role models than those two in particular, but the rest of the squad, there's an infectious enthusiasm and love for the game and a grow for life, and a joy that just radiates out of them. They've been an absolute joy to follow and to cover, and then you stick into the mix the fans. I know there's been a lot of talk this week about Stuart Law wanting to get rid of the Cardiac Kids nickname. I still love that nickname. I'm not sure it will ever go entirely. We'll have to wait and see if it does, depending upon how dramatic their cricket gets in the weeks and months and years ahead. But did hear, I've got to always give a shout out to Paul Radley, my great friend, the newspaper journalist for the national newspaper here in Abu Dhabi. He's calling it Law Ball. I can't claim that one. I think I might have christened Monty Ball in the Bazball era, but he's christening Law Ball as maybe being the more ruthless performance. And it was a more ruthless performance. Just to review the match quickly, the margin of victory is a record one, the highest ever in any match between a full member nation of the ICC and an associate member nation. But today's game was such a dominant performance, a 90-run margin of victory in the end. And outside of a little wobble at the start, a very brave call and the right call from Rohit Paudel to win the toss and to bat first. The statistics have pointed heavily towards that actually being the better method and mechanic of victory there at Sharjah. So despite the early dismissals, Kushal Bhurtel was dismissed by Akil Hussain again for the second time in 2 games. Tried not cutting him, tried going and working him into the leg side. He was trapped dead in front, and then Rohit Paudel was cleaned up after the dots just started to build up some pressure in that power play, and Nepal looked in trouble at 14 for 2. But the 100-run partnership between a highly impressive Aasif Sheikh, who's always probably been the most technically correct player, he was just the answer. He initially took the upper hand in that partnership alongside Sundeep Jora, who came to the crease. That was for the 4th wicket after Kushal ran himself out in rather unfortunate circumstances. A big mix-up with the ball hit to backward point where Matara, the debutant and holder, combined to run Mala out. He could have probably got the dive in slightly tardy, and a lackadaisical piece of running, I think, to say the least, from Kushal Mala. But the 100-run partnership for the fourth wicket was an outstanding one, the highest ever for the fourth wicket versus any team, and it meant that both Aasif Sheikh, who made 68 off 47 with 10 boundaries, and then Sundeep Jora, who really started to press the accelerator in that second half, Nepal hitting 9 sixes altogether, all of them in the second half of the innings. And Jora's knock in particular was a sensational one. He made 63 off 39. Both batters made their first ever 50 against a full member nation in a T20I, and a lovely little piece of sibling rivalry and family history is Aasif Sheikh joined Airee Sheikh, his elder brother, who made that 50, Arif the elder, against the West Indies down in Harare in the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup qualifier 2 years ago. So both of those Sheikh brothers now have 50s against the West Indies. Little contribution from Sharjah with a big 6 and a 6-2 for the returning Mohammad Adil Alam. I'll touch more on him later. Drove that total up to 173 for 6, which we all felt was probably 15 or 20 above par, although the surface definitely played a little bit better this evening as opposed, or last night as it was. Now we're in the early hours of the, whatever it is, Tuesday morning, that it did a couple of days ago. So definitely ahead of where they needed to be, you would suspect, particularly with the way in which the potential we've seen in that Nepal's bowling and their fielding, and well, their fielding was world class. For me, I've been blessed and privileged to watch a huge amount of cricket around the world. It was the single best innings and complete fielding performance I've ever seen, whether it be a T20I or an ODI or a test match. There was no mistakes. It was sensational. It was electric. The speed of the runners in the outfield to cut off those angles and to find ways to just really choke hold the West Indies and put them under so much pressure. So for Nepal, quite simply, too good in the field, and one of the most exceptional fielding performances I've ever seen at any level. Ian Bishop and Carlos Brathwaite both called it world class, and you saw the catches all led off by Kushal Bhurtel's grab that was early off Karen Casey to dismiss Casey Carty, who couldn't believe that he'd been dismissed. And then the wickets, the catches from Gulshan Jah in the deep, I can't split them. I think the second one might have been even better than the first, and they were both simply brilliant. Karen Casey took a very good catch at the end, 7 catches in all, and electricity running through the veins of all of the Nepal fielders, who are just a cut above, I suspect, many of the associates. The Dutch side is probably the one side who can run them very close, but I think they're one of the best fielding sides in the world. And it's not just about Dipendra Singh Airee, it's about Kushal Bhurtel, about Gulshan Jah, it's about Sampal Kami, it's about the skipper Rohit Paudel too. Kushal Mala made an incredible leaping save up with his hand above his head to save 5 runs to prevent a 6-2. So simply brilliant pretty much throughout the entire evening, and that was, well, not the difference between the sides tonight, but very much emphasised that margin of victory. Real disappointment for the men from the West Indies. They toggled their order. They seemed to be a little bit all over the place. Still no debut for Kareem Agor, which surprised me given how good he was in the field as sub-fielder the other night, and how good a CPL he had with the bat. He's a good bowler too. I think he'd be effective here. But yeah, 21 for Jason Holder and double figures for Akeem Auguste and Amir Jangu. Outside of that, nothing really for the West Indies to take note of. And Mohammad Adil Alam, 4 for 24, 3 for 16 for Kushal Bhurtel. His first over went for 16, and then an inspired piece of captaincy brought back from the other end where he had a bigger leg side boundary to give him some protection. Double wicket maiden, followed it up with the match winning wicket and the series winning wicket. He finished with 3 for 16. His strike rate now, I was looking this up earlier, in T20I cricket, outside of a few very minor nations and with not particularly prolific wicket-taking records, the only bowler who takes wickets at a better strike rate in T20Is than Kushal Bhurtel is Kuldeep Yadav of India. He takes one about once every 11.2 deliveries, and I think now Kushal Bhurtel, in fact I can have a look here, I think with that wicket there, the 3 wickets he took tonight, it's going to have improved. He's striking, in fact, at a better rate now than Kushal Bhurtel, than Kuldeep Yadav. Once every 11 deliveries, Kushal Bhurtel is taking wickets, and a lot of those have come against the big boys. 5 he's taken now against the West Indies to go with the 4 against South Africa and 2 against Bangladesh in the World Cup last year. He's been a real find with his leg spin, and even though I'm still going to refer to him occasionally as a part-time leg spinner because he's primarily in the team as a batter, it's a real string to his bow, and he's sick in the fielding. He's a full three-dimensional cricketer too, just like Dipendra Singh Airee, who opened the bowling so effectively, 3 overs, 1 for 4 for him. So overall it meant that it was not just a win, but a rout, a dominating win by 90 runs, rolling the West Indies all out for 83. They were under par, no doubt, but they were, well, really given no opportunity to ever get into the game because Nepal were so exceptional. You might look at the scorecard if you didn't get to watch the game and think, okay, well, hold on. The West Indies, well, they were never really in it and they kind of gave up. But simply today's main story was about the exceptional nature of Nepal's performance. They were so good. It's hard to get across unless you saw it with your own eyes. So tune into those highlights. They'll be up on the Cricket Association of Nepal and I think the Routine of Nepal Banda YouTube channels coming up. Before I wrap up the match review, there's a couple other things I want to talk about. That's kind of the tail of the tape of the day, but I really want to pay tribute to Cricket West Indies. They're going to cop a lot of flack and negative headlines for losing this series. They may well be whitewashed in the series. They could lose it 3-0. That's how well Nepal are playing. But I've got to pay tribute to their administration for coming here. Paris Khadka and Chadar Bahadur Chand and everyone in Cannes did a huge amount of work to convince and persuade the West Indies to come for this series and create the inaugural Unity Cup. Let's hope we get plenty more of it. Let's hope there's dreams of a Nepal tour to the West Indies in future. But so many of the full members don't play that much against associates. There's been some good signs this year with Bangladesh hosting the Netherlands. We've seen the UAE get series against New Zealand and both Bangladesh and Afghanistan in a tri-series in more recent times. Here they've got the advantage of all these brilliant facilities in the UAE and Sharjah, in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai. But I would just love to see more full member nations take on the associates. It's good for the game. And it's good for the long-term growth of the game around the world. Also great to see that Namibia will take on South Africa to launch their ground. That's it, sadly, in just a one-off game. It'd be great to have a series there. That's coming up next month. And I just wanted to read out one message, and I think I spoke about it quite extensively on air, about the importance of acknowledging and praising Cricket West Indies for sending their side here. Yes, it's a weaker side, but they still have 4 or 5 first-choice players in it, in the like of Akil Hussain and Jason Holder, Obed McCoy with all his experience, Fabian Allen and Kyle Mayers too. Haven't had the greatest series, those two at the end, but there's still more than enough talent to win games here for the West Indies. The story's been about Nepal being too good, but something I've loved to see from the Nepal fans, and I praise you all for doing this. This speaks volumes about you as people as well. This is from Arya Junkarki. I think it was on probably the Cannes Facebook page. He says, on behalf of the Nepal cricket fraternity, we sincerely thank the Cricket West Indies board for facilitating and supporting the bilateral series with Nepal. This opportunity not only strengthens the sporting ties between our two nations, but also provides invaluable experience for our players to grow at the international level. Your gesture reflects true sportsmanship and a commitment to the development of cricket beyond the borders. We deeply appreciate your cooperation and look forward to more such engagements in the future. I thought that was beautifully said, and I echo those thoughts sincerely, because if we don't get cooperation like that between boards, and obviously the ICC and the ACC, and indeed each of the regions have roles to play within this. But I really think the world is being awakened to the potential within the associate nations. Not just this series win, but a number of incidents and performances in recent times, that T20 World Cup last year. And I think we're very much at a tipping point. We're at a precipice of the game continuing to grow, primarily through that growth vehicle of T20 cricket. And that's what the ICC has identified, certainly. If you think of the depth within the associate game right now, there's every chance. I do think Nepal should qualify from that upcoming qualifier next week, or starting in about 10 days' time there in Muscat, and they'll be one of the favourites to take the 3 spots. But such is the competition and also the pressure that comes on in those all or nothing qualifiers, if you will. We've seen the results down in Africa. We've seen Italy get through Europe. You know, there is a reality where Nepal could beat the West Indies, maybe even beat them 3-0, but not qualify for the World Cup, just like they didn't qualify for the Asia Cup. Remember, they finished 4th in that ACC Premier last year. That's why UAE, Oman and Hong Kong were the 3 representatives of the associates in the enlarged 8-team Asia Cup. A few other points to touch on. I've spoken about that quality of the fielding. I want to touch on Ian Bishop as well, and just how fantastic it's been to have him here. And again, great praise goes to Can and the broadcast team here to make that possible. Always love spending time around one of the great voices in the history of our game, and certainly one of the premier voices in the world right now, alongside the likes of Mike Atherton and Nasser Hussain et al. I thought that moment with him in the post-match presentation, Ian, for those who don't know him personally, does a huge amount of preparation and is hugely well educated and researched on basically everyone he ever covers. And this series has been no different. He's constantly been asking myself and indeed the former internationals, Sharjah and Paresh Lahani, lots of questions about Nepal. He already knew a huge amount and was a huge advocate of Nepal. But he did two things this evening that I thought carried huge weight. He spoke at length about the growth in quality of the associate game and the brand of cricket that Nepal play, and just how good these associates are and how they deserve more opportunities, advocating for further opportunities for them. But then that touching moment, which will probably go more viral, the one with Rohit Paudel after the match, and breaking with tradition, probably not something that Bish would have done a huge amount of times. He would have delivered the post-match presentation as we're supposed to, but such is his stature that he's absolutely entitled to do it in whatever manner that he would like. And he stopped the presentation and he just said there at the end, he said, "Well, I'd like to congratulate you, Rohit, and shake your hand and wish you all the best." I loved Rohit Paudel's response. I thought it was beautiful. He said, "Thank you so very much for your kind words, sir." You'll see that little clip going around on social media as well. So just looking ahead to that T20 World Cup coming in February, March next year, I think you look at that and you think about, I suppose, the potential with the new team in Italy already in there. We're not certain about the two Africa qualifiers yet, although it's looking very likely that it'll be Zimbabwe and Namibia the way in which they're playing. And of course it can't be Uganda, so we'll have a change to the qualifiers again. They nudged Zimbabwe out last time down in Namibia, but they are already out after just 2 games, having a really surprising defeat to Tanzania. So Tanzania may have a chance, Malawi, who knows, might have a chance, or Nigeria potentially. But the heavy favourites will be Zimbabwe and home soil, and Namibia, who are playing very good cricket. Jan Freiling following up that JJ Smith century with a ton of his own and continuing his return to form, which is great to see. One of the very likeable guys on the associate circuit. But looking ahead to that East Asia Pacific Asia qualifier, just starts on the 8th in October. I think Nepal have to remember, I think it's a laser focus on that qualifier. All of the joy of this week will very much be in the rearview mirror in about 5-10 days time. So they have to round out the job tomorrow, play as well as they can tomorrow, but get that focus onto Muscat and make sure that they're at their very best. Also the format, if you haven't seen it yet, is a little bit tricky. 3 groups of 3. And if you don't get through that group, they should get through that group. Nepal absolutely. But you go 3 groups of 3, the top 2 go through the group, and then you play the 4 of the sides that you're yet to play yet. You'll retain the points that you've taken from the match you played against the side you go through with, and then the 2 games from the other 2 groups, so that'll be 4 games in total, will make a 5-match Super 6 table, and the top 3 from that Super 6 will advance to the World Cup. Nepal should be favourites. They should make it back-to-back World Cups, favourites alongside UAE, I would imagine, and also hosts Oman. Don't rule them out on their home soil. They'll be very good. But keep your eyes on Samoa. Great story with Ross Taylor returning to the land of his mother, and indeed 5 or 6 players with first-class experience there in New Zealand. So they'll be very strong. Japan on the rise, absolutely. Papua New Guinea have their troubles. They're the 3 EAP representatives, and then the powerhouses from Asia will also be joined by the likes of Kuwait. To keep your eyes on them, Malaysia too. And I've no doubt we're in for a cracker of a tournament there in Muscat. Also a word from Mohammad Adil Alam. This blog is probably going to go much longer than I planned it, but luckily I've got the company of the tea and a beautiful evening, much less sweaty and less humid than it was earlier on today. Very hot at the ground. But what a story of redemption for Mohammad Adil Alam, rightly found and proved innocent after what can only have been described as a nightmare period for him, back into international cricket from the wilderness, mainly thanks to that Nepal A structure that he praised heavily, and the tour of India where he was impressive. He's kept himself fit, he's always been very strong, and he's kind of that little seam bowling, power hitting all-rounder that Nepal have always wanted in their team, that will add real balance. Only came in because of the injury to Nandan Yadav. That was understandable. He's been precautionally rested. I'm not sure he'll play tomorrow night either. I think they'll save him for the World Cup qualifier. are. But I just thought the way in which he carried himself this evening, exceptional. And after what he's been through, it's so pleasing to see him back and hitting sixes and taking wickets, 4 for ball, plenty of slower balls, very clever for the conditions, and was helped out massively by some wonderful fielding off his bowling as well. But 4 for 24, career best figures for him on a day that he's not going to forget, and very much delighted to see that. Also a word for Stuart Law. The CV he's come in with, the pedigree he's come in with, and in no way taking away from the legacy of Pabudu Dasanayak or Monty Desai. He's building on their success, but he's doing it in his own style, and certainly he looked a very satisfied man. Probably my favourite moment of the entire evening was Gulshan Jah's second catch out at long off the bowling of off the bowling of Lalit Rajbanshi, but Jason Holder was batting, and it was a ball that you would have thought was one bounce for 95 times out of 100, but somehow Jah, to his weaker side, sprinted 15 metres to his left and got his hands underneath it, and it was an exceptional catch. So good. We've seen probably 5 or 6 that are A-star grades, and the camera panned, a brilliant broadcast crew we've got here, to Stuart Law, and even Stuart Law has been pretty stoic and kind of pretty, when a camera's on, he's been pretty kind of down the line, whether the side's doing well or poorly. Even he went, "Oh, that is," and he couldn't help but raise a smile, and he was almost in shock as to how good it was. Little word for the fans there this evening. Not quite as many as there were on Saturday. I really hope that all of you can get down. I know it's so tough, so many of you from Nepal who live here in the United Arab Emirates, particularly getting there for 6:30. It's a very difficult place to get to, Sharjah, with the traffic sometimes if you don't live there. So I know it's tough, but if you can find a way, you got to call in sick or find a way to get there. You may well see history tomorrow night again in a clean sweep. But the fans that were there were excellent. They made so much noise, they added such colour, and that couple that I mentioned on air had flown all the way from Australia, especially to be in and bought the VVIP tickets. It was lovely to meet them, get a photo with them. A couple of final points, just a couple of stats. I thought you might like these. But thanks as always to the guys who kind of find these. I was pretty sure I knew one of them actually said that there were 6 Associate Series victories. There's now been 7. So just to give you the list of those, Afghanistan twice beat Zimbabwe back when they were an associate, both 2-0 down in Zimbabwe, I think they were. UAE beat Ireland in 2021 in a 3-match series 2-1. Namibia beat Zimbabwe 3-2. And then USA, a famous victory for them over Bangladesh in a 3-match series. That was in Texas, and it was the UAE who beat Bangladesh earlier this year. They're the only 6 full member series wins for associates in history. So that's how rare this is, how difficult this is. And of course it's difficult with all of the disparity in fixtures and opportunities and funding and player depth and facilities and all of the things that the associates battle and challenge to try and scrap and fight up against the big boys. But they deserve to be on that list, the 7th member on it. And also I love this one from Kastab Gudapati, today's total, the lowest in history by any full member against an associate. It breaks the record of 88 that England were bowled out for by the Netherlands back in 2014 at that T20 World Cup, with that brilliant commentary from David Bumble Lloyd, where England were double dutched, but West Indies 83 all out, bottom of that list. So I'll give that one a retweet here as well, not that I'm on that platform too much these days, just so you can see it. And I think that's about it. One last point, the wider context and importance of this win. I do get a couple of messages asking about test status, the possibility of that in the future, the likelihood of that in the future. And one of the qualifying factors, there is actually a list of criteria that you have to fulfill to become a full member nation of the ICC. A lot of it is off field, a lot of it is the breadth and the depth of cricket across the country and the culture of it, and the number of clubs and the number of facilities and turf wickets and things like that, and stadia. But also there is a performance merit base to it, and one of those merit bases is an associate must also register 4 wins against 2 or more different full members ranked in the top 10 of either T20I or ODI cricket, depending upon the format. They have now got 2 against the West Indies. Remember, West Indies before this series ranked in 6th. They are in the ledger, and that's a small step. Still a long distance to travel to test status, even though I know it's an ambition of the organisations, but they're a small step on that journey and on that path towards test status. Final note, our unsung hero of the evening. So many people from Cannes deserve so much praise for pulling this series off. At a home away from home, while the TU ground continues to be renovated, saw the floodlight pylons go in there today at the TU. Can't wait to see that final development. But have a listen to this. In our commentators' minibus on the way home, Carlos Brathwaite won't be with us tomorrow. He's not here for the third game because he's got to get out for the Women's World Cup. So Carlos wasn't with us, but me, Ian Bishop and the rest of the guys all there. Ian Bishop in the front seat directly in front of me, and I just looked up from my phone, and both of us saw something. Actually, I think the driver saw it before anyone. We saw one of the, I presume, a spare wheels or possibly a blown out wheel off a big HGV, a big heavy goods vehicle, come tumbling across the freeway. And very nearly, if it wasn't for the quick thinking of our unsung hero, our driver, saving all of us from what would have been a very nasty car crash or a minibus crash. So that is our man. I either didn't get his name or forgotten his name. I'll give him a shout out in tomorrow's wrap up. So thank you, sir. I did get kind of pressed forward with heavy braking into Ian Bishop's seat. I said, Jesus, Bish, I nearly came into you there. And he goes, I would have lifted you up, Lenny. You would have been all right. But it was a scary moment, and the big, one of those massive wheels came flying across the freeway, crashed into the midway section of the freeway before it went on to the next one, or motorway. And yeah, the driver did incredibly well to avoid it and not swerve or crash. So thanks to him. It takes a village to pull off events like this, and they're doing that ever so well. So to tomorrow night and a potential series whitewash, you can join us live, not just on Kantapur, on the routine of Nepal Banda pages, both in Nepal and the Middle East. It's on Sony in India and Fancode and all across the world in all sorts of places, YouTube as well. So I want to really thank you so much. I do try my best to get to as many messages as I can. I find almost all of the Nepal games I ever do quite overwhelming emotionally. It was very emotional at the end there, as the realization and the enormity of what was happening with that series victory. Didn't quite have the drama that we're used to with Nepal, but certainly the emotions were completely there. And yeah, it's a privilege getting to do what we do and bringing you these pictures, and hopefully doing as good a job at explaining just how brilliant these players are. But yeah, I just want to thank you all so much for the support. I try to get back to everyone as much as I can, but it's close to impossible with all the different platforms as well, and so many beautiful messages and thoughts from all the way around the world. And one thing I do love hearing from you is where you're coming from and where you're living, particularly, and enjoying the coverage from, because it's great to get that global scale of spread. We've heard messages from Australia and Korea, Japan, and all over the Gulf and Europe and the Americas. So thank you so much. Finished my tea pretty much here, maybe one last sup. The only thing left is to say is namaskar and good night from me. Thanks again. Don't rule out a big West Indies blowback tomorrow. I suspect they'll come quite hard with an awful lot of headlines being written up about this series defeat. They will not want to be clean swept, and they will come back hard at Nepal. But if Nepal play anything like they did today, there'll be every chance it will be Nepal 3 and West Indies 0. And who would have thought that at the start of this Unity Cup? So good evening from me. Thanks again. We'll see you tomorrow.